Hello everyone. In this session, we are going to discuss about the French Revolution causes. Okay. So, what are the major reasons behind the French Revolution? Before getting into what are the actual causes that led to this particular great event, one of the greatest events the world history has ever seen, because it had a huge impact on future course of history, because it changed the entire European continent, not just the entire European continent, entire the world history itself only, because it had a huge impact. And also many questions were asked by UPSC about French Revolution, American Revolution. So first we'll talk about the French Revolution. Okay, at the same time little bit introduction first, then again we'll come to the causes. Understood? And the event, the French Revolution event, the outbreak of the revolution happened in 1789. It continued until 1799. Okay. Now this revolution, this particular, it is one of the, like I already mentioned, one of the foremost events. At the same time, it led to radical changes in political aspect of France, again social aspect of France, again societal aspect of, or rather economical aspect of France also. And this revolution began with one event. Of course, we are not getting into event in this one particular session. We'll just talk about the major causes behind the revolution. That event was the summoning of Estates General. It was a parliament. Okay. The summoning of parliament itself, the feudal parliament itself, was a revolution, because that parliament had not met for nearly 175 years. So that is what radical changes happened. Okay. So that is Estates General was called to discuss certain issues. So that is the beginning of revolution. And it ended with the formation of a new French government called the French Consulate, which was headed by Napoleon. So Napoleon is one of the figures, one of the historical personalities related to French Revolution. And it was happening in November 1790. For nearly 10 years, the French society, the French political system was in turmoil. It was not just one change, just many changes happened within society, within politics, particularly in political systems. Okay, like I already mentioned, one of the foremost, the most important events in the history, especially in world history. It shaped the history as it is today. It has influenced many constitutions, including Indian constitution. We talk about the concept of republic concept. We talk about the concept of the will of the people, the sovereignty of people. Okay, concept like liberty, equality, fraternity, all those things were influenced by the French Revolution. Okay, and now they say again little bit more introduction about the French Revolution. With the outbreak of this French Revolution, there is a famous quote: "The entire European history is merges in the history of one nation, one event, and again one man." And one nation is France, because whatever that was happening in France started influencing entire Europe and entire world also. One event, that is the French Revolution, and one man, that was Napoleon Bonaparte. Okay, because their actions, especially the actions of the French people during that point in time, the leaders of French Revolution, that influenced the continental politics. Okay. At the same time, some events that happened in France, not just 1789, some of the events that happened in 1830, 1848, that is directly the result of this one particular revolution. Okay. And that had reverberation in other parts of Europe also. If a revolution happened in France, there was there used to be revolution in other parts of Europe. Okay, I think one of the chancellors of Austria, one of the famous personalities in history again, that is Clemens von Metternich. He said that is when France sneezes, the rest of Europe catches cold. It means whatever happening in France, that is going to influence the rest of Europe. Okay, and Napoleon, he influenced entire continent for nearly 15 years, from 1799 to until 1814-15. And one event, that is French Revolution, because its ideals, the ideologies of French Revolution, that is liberty, equality, fraternity, that influence other people in other countries of Europe. Like we can talk about Germany, Italy, the German unification, Italian unification, that again influenced by the French Revolution ideals. That is what, with the outbreak of French Revolution, the European history merges in the history of one nation, one event, and one man, and shook the entire continental foundation which was there, the middle, or we can say middle ages, or which is also called dark ages. That was the foundation with which the entire European continent was basing upon, and it shook that very foundation. And the people wanted a new foundation for all their countries. That is what Germany took birth. At the same time, Italy as a nation rose. And it's a new reconstruction on a new basis. That new basis of liberty, base of nationalism, base of equality. Okay, and new ideas came into existence, that liberty, equality, fraternity. That led to liberalism. open-mindedness, that we can say freedom of speech and expression, democracy, the will of the people, and nationalism, that is respecting rights of we can say people with the common language, common heritage, common race. That is what German language influence Germany nationalism, Italian language, that is again Italian nationalism. Understood? And the 19th century Europe, this is we are talking about 18th century, because we are talking about French Revolution in 1789, of course the later part of 18th century. The 19th century Europe saw the victory of these ideals. Okay, these ideals were established, or we can say these ideas influenced the history of Europe in 19th century. Belgium, establishment of Belgium as a country, because Belgium got independence from Netherlands. Greek War of independence from Ottoman Empire. Okay, then again German unification and Italian unification from the clutches of Austria and France. So all those things were influenced by French Revolution. And that is in 2025 mains also one question asked about French Revolution, how it influenced the contemporary events. Now before getting into the what are the causes of the revolution, what do you mean by revolution first and foremost? Okay, simply it is a rapid change in either in society, in politics, in economy, okay, of a country. And it could be overthrow of a government in terms of politics. It could be despotic to democracy. Despotic government is, we can say, the monarchical despotic governments. The monarchy will be the constitution, it is the law. Now from that one to the rule of law, that is democracy. It could be structural change in society, let's say from feudalism to progressive society, from landlords dominated society to, we can say, equality within society, forward looking society. Then again economic organization could be, let's say for example there is government control to market based control. That itself is like LPG reforms in India 1991. It is a revolution in economic sphere in India. It was, we can say, import substitution. That was, we can say, from 1950s until 1991. Indian economy was not much opened, but after 1991 liberalization, privatization, globalization, Indian economy opened up, and that itself is a revolution. So I'm just talking about general meaning of revolution. It's a rapid changes in political sphere, social sphere, and economic sphere. Okay. Now come to the causes of revolution. Why French people wanted that revolution in political system, in economic system, in we can say a social system. Now there are causes in the same way. That is, there are social causes, the political causes, economic, then again philosophical cause, and American Revolution also influenced French Revolution, because one event influences other events. Okay, how French Revolution influenced the Constitution of India today. In the same way, the American Revolution, which happened earlier than French Revolution we're talking about 1780s, the American Revolution in 1770s. Okay, that event also influenced the French Revolution too. Okay, now look at the social causes. To understand the social causes, again, don't get too much overwhelmed by these facts, because all these things are very similar to any other society that was facing during that point of time. Even today also some of the feudal, some of the societies, modern societies also have this kind of discrimination in the societies. Ultimately you have to understand there was some kind of discrimination in the society. It is dominated by few sections, like we talk about the Indian society itself only, especially ancient and medieval times, and dominated by the few upper sections. And lower sections challenge that authority. Like we can talk about Bhakti movement was a challenge to that particular authority. Like Shankaracharya, Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya was a challenge to that upper domination. Okay. In the same way here also in French society also, there were divisions in the society. Okay, that society division we can talk about estates. These were called as, we can say, estates. Okay. That is the first estate, second estate, and third estate. The first estate is composed of the clergy. Clergies are priestly classes. Like Indian society was also had priestly classes, and the ruling classes, the Kshatriyas, we call them as nobles. We can say clergy, it is the priestly classes. Then again the commoners, we call them Vaishyas and Shudras, and the priestly class we call as Brahmanas. And in the same way, there is a some kind of, we had fourfold division. It is a threefold division: the first, second, and third estate. And over this clergy, they did the church spiritual duties. And look at their population; they were only 1% of the population. Okay, and in nobility, there is a ruling class, the king, queens, and princes, ministers. They are only 2% of the population, and the rest 97% of the population, that is the common people. They are called as the third estate. Okay, and these commoners can also be further divided into two. One is, we can say, big businessmen, lawyers, merchants. We can say kind of a middle classes, and the lower class, peasants and artisans. So these of the French society was divided: the clergy, the nobility, and the commoners. And these two together, they are called as the privileged class, because they add some privileges. I will come to what those privileges. And these are, we can say, underprivileged classes. Okay, underprivileged. So we can say this kind of division was there. Now these commoners, they were exploited by these two estates and they want to challenge that system. That is what French Revolution is. Simple aspect. The commoners were getting exploited by the first two estates and they want to challenge that system. And how these challenges was there? What was this exploitation, we can say? It is the nature of the French society divided into three estates. And why society was divided into these three systems? Because of the ancient, or we can say medieval feudal system. It dated back to the medieval times and that was continued. Even though ideas were changing, the modern tendencies were coming into other parts of Europe, but French society was remaining more feudal in nature. Okay, and this is, we can call it as the old regime in French society. Even the political system which was existed before 1789, that is a old regime. The economic system which was there, that was also called as old regime. And this old regime in France, the division of the society into these three estates. Okay, and like I told you, the first two estates, look at their population, only 3%. They enjoyed a lot of 3%, or rather they enjoyed a lot of privileges, we can say. Okay, lot of privileges. I'll come to those. By birth only they enjoyed a lot of privileges. And what are the privileges? Some kind of tax exemptions were there. Okay, at the same time, they no need to pay any kind of taxation. And all the taxation burden was on the three estates only. Okay, and even the clergy class, which the priestly class which was there, they were also divided into higher clergy and lower clergy. And this higher clergy had monopolized all the higher posts within the church. And they also recruited from the noble families only. That is the ruling section. And they enjoyed a luxurious life and they collected one tax. So everybody should pay the tax. That is 1/10 of their agricultural production. The tax is called as tithe. Maybe pronunciation could be different, French pronunciation. A tax levied by the church. And so the 1/10 of agricultural produce, they should pay to this higher clergy. And the lower clergy, below them, they were exploited by this higher clergy. Okay, and they are the one who are actually doing all the spiritual duties, but they were getting paid. They did not get any kind of promotion from lower status to higher status because they are directly recruited from the noble families. And they were also ready to challenge the system. Sorry, there is a spelling mistake. They were ready to challenge the system. Challenge against the domination of higher clergy. Now look at it. Within the privileged classes, there is some indignation. There is some kind of disillusionment. There is disappointment. Only few sections of society were enjoying privileges. Only few sections of the society were enjoying, we can say, some kind of rights within the society. Okay. Now look at the nobles' position. Like I told you, kings, queens, princes, governors, ministers, they owned most of the land. And they had the monopoly of government offices. Higher clergy had the monopoly of the church's position. Okay. And these nobles, as a ruling class, they had forgotten their welfare duties. And now the welfare duty put upon the monarchy itself, that is the ruling family. But the ruling family was also despotic, that is political causes will come to. Now the government is also not caring, and even the nobles who had the minister's position, who had this, we can say, governor's position, and they are also not doing any kind of, taking any kind of welfare activities towards the people. But they were collecting feudal charges. People used to pay, the French people used to pay some kind of money to these local rulers, or we can say local officials, or again, they were also monopoly of the royal families only, in exchange of some kind of welfare duties. But they had forgotten their welfare duties. But they were collecting the charges, but are not doing any kind of duties at all. Okay. And because they claimed they were doing the welfare duty, there were tax exemptions for them. People had to pay taxes, but these nobles did not have to pay any kind of taxes. And why they did not have to pay taxes? Because they had the duty towards these people, but they had forgotten their duties. Because they were not doing any kind of duty, now people challenged, they should not collect these feudal charges. At the same time, these nobles should be taxed by the government, by the monarchy. But the monarchy was not taxing them, assuming they were doing their duty, but they were not doing the duty. And they had hunting privileges. Common people did not have that hunting privileges also. Okay. And one of the taxes they have to pay, that is style tax. It is directly paid to the state. It was not levied on the nobles, not on ministers, not on these governors, local governors and everything. That is again a monopoly, we can say monopolistic system what was there. And now people want to challenge that one. And now within the commoners, again two divisions I told you. There is one is rich class, middle class, we can say are bourgeois, that is a pronunciation. and there is a lower classes. And who made up of it? Businessmen, merchants and lawyers. They are well educated section who understood the anomaly in the social structure of France. There was a lot of discrimination was there. Discrimination between we can say privileged classes and underprivileged classes, and they wanted revolution the most, and they were open to new ideologies. What are those new ideologies? Liberalism, democracy, fraternity, equality. They are the one, they became the torch bearers of these particular slogans. We will come to that one. And who are the lower classes? The artisans, laborers, peasants, we can say. They lived in desperation, and much of the taxation burden on these two classes, of course. They had to pay taxes. Lower class also has to pay taxes. Within the commoners, this section was living in indignation. They lived in desperation at the mercy of, we can say, clergy and nobles. Whatever come what may, these people had to pay taxes. And they are the one who paid the stale and tithes. Of course, they also paid all other taxes. Okay. And they lived in starvation because there was a shortage of bread during that point of time. There was a basic we can say food during that point of time in France during that point of time. Okay. And now what is general condition of the people? Yes, the burden of financing activity, the taxes completely on third estate, and population was also increasing. And again, that is from 23 million in 1715 to 28 million. I am going in detail. You don't have to remember all these facts, just because not many people will have understanding about world history. So I am getting into details, intricate detail, so that you will just understand the context of it. You don't have to remember all these kind of minor details over there, but just the context of what was the condition of the people. The people population was rising, and there were taxation burden on them, and they wanted to challenge the system. Simple. Okay. And then it's because the population increasing, there was a demand for food grains also. But the food grains production was not increasing. So as the production is not increasing, there is shortage of food, the prices of bread rose rapidly. There was inflationary situation. Okay. And when the inflation increasing, but the wages were not increasing. Tax burden, inflation, the wages were actually decreasing rather than stagnant or decreasing rather than increasing, and did not keep up pace with the rising prices. And this widened the gap between rich and poor. Of course, today also we talk about the concept of rich are getting richer and poor are getting poorer. Same kind of situation in France before the revolution, that is before 1789. Even when floods happen, when droughts happen, okay, the situation would become more and more worse. But there were no tax exemptions at all, and that led to a crisis, a subsistence crisis, we can say. The basic food was also not available, and that was the nature of this old regime. The people wanted to change this old regime. That old regime was filled with desperation. That old regime was filled with, we can say, discrimination. Okay, and that is the reason revolution was inevitable or imminent in France in 1789. So this was general condition of the common people. They were living in desperation. So social condition very simple. Society was divided into 3 estates. Only 2 estates enjoyed all the privileges. They did not pay any kind of taxes. All the taxes burden on the people. And at the same time, population was rising, but the production was not keeping pace. Because of that, an inflationary situation happened. Because inflationary situation happened, people couldn't afford it. If they had to afford, the wages had to increase, but wages were not increasing at the same pace at the prices. Now, what the political causes? It was ruled by a monarchy. That monarchy name was the Bourbon monarchy, Bourbon family. It was absolutist and despotic, and they had assumed these welfare duties from these nobles, but they were not doing the duty. Nobles are also not doing the duty, and the monarchy is also not doing the duty, and they were despotic. Despotic means dictators. They are the law. Whatever they did, that is the law. And it was absolutist, filled with luxurious life, filled with, we can say, nepotism, favoritism. And who was the king? Louis XVI. He was only 20 years old. In 1774, he became the king, and he was married to Austrian princess Marie Antoinette, and they lived a very luxurious life. They constructed a new palace, and lived a very luxurious life. Okay, and they neglected the administration. And corruption was rampant because look at the system itself. How the society is organized, and society must be filled with kind of corruption only. Okay, and at the same time, look at political condition. The people are any person who oppose this monarchy could be arrested. And that's why I told you absolutist and despotic. And how they could be arrested? By just issuing these letters de cachet. They are kind of a warrants. It can be arrested it can be issued by the government. Anyone could be arrested without fair trial. And different laws in different provinces. Entire France, if we divide into different states, one law in one state can be legal, the same law in another state can be illegal. What is legal in one province can be illegal in another province. So it led to confusion among people. People did not know what action to take in different provinces. And that is what the political situation is. Now look at the social condition and look at the political conditions. What people will do. So people were ready to challenge the system. They wanted changes. I told you, revolution, rapid change. They're tired of the system since the feudal times, that is the Middle Ages. So that is social system and economic, political system. Look at the economic and financial causes. Look at all the taxation burden on people. Answered, Louis XVI, okay, so he was the king. I told you he came to power in 1774. So he found an empty treasury. Why he found an empty treasury? In spite of empty treasury, he was living a luxurious life. But I'm coming to why the empty treasury. Because of previous rulers like Louis XIV, Louis XV, they engaged in many wars. And when they were engaging in many wars, that led to financial distress, that led to draining of financial resources. And more importantly, I told you they were living an extravagant life, a luxurious life. They had to maintain this palace, that expenses went into more, or we can say massive expenditure we can talk about. I couldn't able to quantify, but exactly, it is very huge. Okay, and I told you American War of Independence. Okay, now same Louis XVI, he helped these 13 American colonies to gain their independence from Britain, because Britain was the natural enemy or arch enemy of France. So there is a concept of enemy's enemy is my friend. The Americans, 13 American colonies, they are fighting against Britain. The French government is helping the Americans to fight against Britain. So that also costed some money. Okay, the previous wars of Louis XIV, Louis XV, they were also costing money. On top of that, one empty treasury is there, and they have to maintain that luxurious palace. All those things compounding, and government have to take more debt because people do not have the money to pay the taxes only, and the rich section are not paying the taxes. Okay, and how much debt has increased from $1 billion livra. Livra was the currency then. From 1 billion to 2 billion it increased. And as you raise debt, you have to pay interest on that one. That is 10% interest on that particular loan. Now, whatever the taxes that was collecting by the government, it was going as interest payments. Or there is no spending on welfare of people, because government has to pay back the debt. Why the debt? Because there is no resources, there is no income only. Why there is no income? Because all the income was spent on wars. Answered. Now look at, to meet the regular expenses such as cost of maintaining an army, court, running government office, universities, the state was forced to increase taxes. And who were paying these taxes? The common people. Look at how the economic situation and the political situation and the social situation are interconnected. Okay. So this is what these people want to challenge this particular economic and financial conditions. And on whom this taxation was increased? On common people. That is third estate. The privileged section, they are not going to pay, they wouldn't pay. And the kind of condition, or kind of life the third estate were living, they were not in a position to pay the tax. They couldn't pay. The privileged section wouldn't pay, and the underprivileged section, they couldn't pay because they didn't have the money to pay. So this was the economic and financial causes. Look at the social causes and the political and the economic causes. How was French political system was there during this point of time? How was France's economic system was there? Social system was there? And look at it one. The king tried to deal with the financial crisis because an empty treasury. There is a necessity of running the government, run the offices, but there is no money. Now what he tried to deal with the financial crisis? That is, he appointed a new finance minister. His name is Turgot. Full name is Anne Robert Jacques Turgot. He proposed taxing the rich because that was the only way left, because people were not in a position to pay the taxes. He proposed taxing the rich, but it was opposed. The two estates resisted increasing taxes, so he was removed from his position. Because that is a nepotism, that was a favoritism. The clergy and nobles, they were controlling the monarchy. And there was a growing opposition to this finance minister, and he was removed. And now he was replaced by another finance minister, Jacques Necker. He also proposed the same thing. There was no other way out. But he also did not get any kind of support from the clergy as well as nobles. He is also removed. And the people were also demanding that you have to tax the rich people. Because they are the only people who are in a position to pay the taxes, but they are not paying. The government should make them pay. And that is the reason that a States General was summoned. It was never summoned for last 175 years because that States General, it was a parliament, was the authority to discuss the taxation matters. That is the reason that summoning of that States General itself is a revolution. Because people forced the king to summon that parliament. Okay, and we know world history is purely mains related. So a simple question, of course it's not a PYQ, it's a simple question. Look at that one. Fiscal causes lay at the root of revolution. Explain, very simple. How fiscal causes was a major reason. Because fiscal reasons at the root of the revolution is because that fiscal causes increasing in taxes and everything that made the social condition of peasants live in desperation. Okay, so these are major root causes. Just give us the approach in the comments just below. Just we'll go through that one. So let's see what your thoughts will be. But of course, you can write this after understanding all the causes. Now, let's better understand is fiscal causes more. That is at the root because you have to focus more on the fiscal causes. I'll just give a simple approach. Focus more on the fiscal causes, that is economic causes, financial issues. Then how that impacted the political situation as well as social situation. Okay, you have to write all the causes, say simple here, but focusing more on the fiscal issues here. But of course, the fiscal issues is a major, we can say, fueling material, and the spark was needed. That spark came with some other causes to come through some other causes. You just give us the approach, what approach you will take, just the approach, not the entire answer. So let's see, we'll just go through that comments. Let's see that one. Okay. Now, what are the philosophical causes? We talked about social causes. Then again, political causes, the economic or the financial causes, now the philosophical causes. Like we talk about philosophical causes means the ideologies. If we come to Indian freedom movement, there is the ideology of moderates, ideology of revolutionaries, ideology of extremists, ideology of Gandhi, ideology of Russian Revolution, and that is we can say socialism. All these things influence Indian nationalism. Indian leaders were guided by these particular ideologies. Now, what are the ideologies these people of France were guided by, and these are that we are coming into those ideologies. That is the philosophical reasons behind that one, and these philosophers gave expressions to people's problems. There are three major philosophers, we'll come to that. That it said that the French people drank the poison of philosophy. I told you the middle class, the bourgeois section among the commoners, that is the rich class I talked about, were open to ideological currents. They were open to these kind of philosophical ideas. What those ideologies, I'll come to. Okay, there was an ideological revolt in France before the actual revolt. The people, they say they drank the poison of philosophy. People were reading about different philosophical ideas of Rousseau, of Voltaire, of Montesquieu, and they gave expressions to people's problems, and they gave solutions to people's problems. And people were inspired by these philosophical ideas. Writings of some thinkers gave expression to the discontent, to indignation, and which people were facing. The three major philosophers, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, then again Montesquieu, then again Voltaire. So, what are those ideas that gave the French people the reconstruction idea, how the France should be in future, what should be the France political system in future, what should be the France economic system or even social system. These are the three people. This is Rousseau, this is Voltaire, and this is Montesquieu. Okay. What are their ideas? Look at their ideas. First, look at the Rousseau's ideas. Of course, these people died well before the revolution could happen, but their ideas influenced entire generation. And he wrote a book, the very famous book, The Social Contract. And in this book, he talks about divine right of people to rule, not the divine right of kings. he directly went against the despotic rule of the Bourbon monarchy. He said that people should be ruling the country, and he gave a plan for social reconstruction on the base of equality. Everybody should be equal. But the French society was based upon division, hierarchical pattern. There is a first estate, second estate, third estate. But he said everybody should be equal and should be sovereignty of people, not the kings or the queens. Now Montesquieu, again, he died way back in 1755. He advocated for constitutional monarchy. They were not against monarchy per se, but rather they were against despotic monarchy. They wanted that monarchy to be controlled by a constitution. There should be a rule of law. The constitution should guide the actions of kings. That is called as constitutional monarchy, which was prevailing in Britain. That is Britain, it was believed in the British or English system of government. Even though Britain had kings and queens, they were guided by the constitution. And he exposed the divine right of kings. He is talking about divine right of people. He is also against divine right of kings. He is talking about there should be constitutional monarchy should be there. And he showed what is the evils of this absolutist monarchy, what Bourbon monarchy was doing, how it was filled with corruption, how it was filled with nepotism, favoritism, what is the kind of luxurious life they were living, not caring for people. He gave expressions to those ideas. Now people got influenced. That is the reason people drank the poison of philosophy, particularly the educated section, the bourgeois, rich, middle classes, business persons and lawyers. Now Voltaire, 1694 to 1778, he also influenced Rajaram Mohan Rai in India. Rajaram Mohan Rai believed in Voltairean philosophy. What is Voltaire talks about? Supremacy of reason against, we can say, superstitions, against, or rather giving importance to rationalism, giving importance to freedom of speech and expression. He criticized the church. In this case, in India, Rajaram Mohan Rai criticized the, we can say, priestly domination. He is for benevolent despotism. Yes, let kings rule, but they should be benevolent towards the people. They should be kind towards the people. They should not be cruel towards the people. And he's talked about the church should separate from the state. The priestly class should not involve in governance activities. Or in running of the government, there should be no say of the priestly classes. Okay. And only an enlightened monarch could bring about a change. That enlightened monarch would be the person who has the liberal ideas, who would care for the people. Okay. Again, look at it one. Rousseau may be quite different because he's directly talking about against monarchy for rule of people. But these two, they were not against monarchy per se. They wanted that monarchy should be constitutional monarchy. So these ideas influence the French people. Now these people, they are showing the condition of people, the condition with which the monarchy is ruling, and how it was evil. At the same time, they are providing alternatives. Now the people wanted that alternative. People wanted to bring that change from the old regime to the new regime that happened in 1789 to until 1799. Okay. And the last reason, the American War of Independence from 1770 to 1783, 1775 to 1783. Now here French soldiers went to America to fight against Britain, the arch enemy of France. Okay. France supported American colonies. Enemy's enemy is my friend. And French soldiers fought alongside Americans. Now Americans were fighting for democracy. Americans were fighting for civil rights. Americans were fighting for economic freedom. And there is no economic freedom at home. There is no democracy at home. That is France we are talking about. There is no civil liberties at home. Anybody could be arrested just for opposing the Bourbon monarchy. Now the same soldiers, they came back home. They became leaders of this revolution. They themselves went against the monarchy, the same monarchy they are supposed to serve. These soldiers brought back these ideas into France from America, because America was also experiencing a lot of changes during that point of time. This influenced the French minds. After they came home with new ideas, the new ideas, there are already existing new ideas, that is through the expressions of Voltaire, Montesquieu and Rousseau, and now they came up with another new ideas. Of course, all those ideas are interrelated. They saw one country go through those ideas and establishing those ideas. And they understood they were being denied the same rights at home, which American people are getting, but the French people are not getting from their own government. American people were denied these rights by a foreign country, but here the French government, the French state, denying the same rights to the French citizens only. So these are the simple causes, we can say, that is the social condition of France, or social causes, political causes, economic causes, and then again American War of Independence and philosophical causes. Very simple, very easy to understand. Doesn't matter whether you have a background in world history or not, but it's just simple causes. You just have to understand what people were going through, what was the situation, what was the government situation, what is the economic situation, and what people wanted in that place. And that is rapid change that happened in 1789. Hopefully, you understood this concept really well. Just give us the approach, what approach you would have taken to write that one particular question, because it's purely mains world history. So thank you so much. See you in the next session.